Hi, this is Stephanie Miller from The Stephanie Miller Show. Please enjoy this exclusive clip from my show on Political Voices Network. All right, I got it. You know what? I can't wait to talk some with Noel Casler, and he's here. Noel Casler, a comedian extraordinaire who's been trying to warn us for how long, Chris?
11 billion years.
About Donald Trump. Good morning, Noel Casler. Good morning.
Good morning, Stephanie. Great to be here.
Nice to see you again. First of all, I couldn't wait to talk with you about Havana. And then we'll get on to other things. You tweeted, Trump holding a golf tournament days after his first wife and mother of some of his children are basically buried in the backyard is a new low in a long life of crassness. I saw a picture. There's literally a patch of dirt and a paving stone with her name on it for a tax break. It's so Donald Trump, isn't it?
Right. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. And when he applied for the permit to have the cemetery on his golf course, for his tombstone, he wants a 16-foot high obelisk. And that became contentious at the permit meeting in the town of Bedminster. I'm not even joking, right? So do you think Donald Trump would be satisfied with a paving stone with his name carved? They didn't even spring for sod. If you saw the picture, it's just dirt. Yeah. I had a more elaborate thing for my cat when I buried him in the backyard.
You know, Chris gives me the stank eye when I talk with Havana conspiracy theories, but because he's so mobby, I'm like, really? The day before his deposition, he gets out of the deposition and there's no, I don't know. It feels like there's a lot of suspicious things about the Havana thing. What are your thoughts on it?
I agree with you 100%. I don't want to sound conspiracy theorist either, but there's a lot of very convenient deaths in Donald Trump's history if you look into it, right? Harold Bornstein was his Dr. Feelgood on the Upper East Side. He died mysteriously in January of 20, right after all that stuff happened at the Capitol. That's the same guy that his security guards took his medical records from when he was elected. Yeah. So it's suspicious that she died. It was like a 48-hour autopsy, no toxicology report, and then she's buried on private property where she can never be exhumed.
Well, right, but also 73 and an excellent skier, for all we know, like in good. It just, there seemed a lot of weird things about it, that it was blunt torso force injury and she had no injuries or broken ankles, hands, anything. Like it just, the whole thing.
I agree. And I used to do an event with her every year called the Angel Ball in New York City. It was a big fundraiser. And she was a hardy woman. Do you know what I mean? She wasn't like some frail, octogenarian or something that you think a fall down the stairs would take her out. She was a big, solid lady.
Yeah. Yeah. I just like
she wasn't, she looked like she was a bit of a mess too, to be honest. But, I know somebody.
She married Donald Trump.
Exactly. If you want to gossip, I know somebody who saw her in a restaurant a few days earlier and said she was looking kind of rough. But that looking rough is code on the Upper East Side for Xanax and a few.
That's what I was wondering about. Why there was no toxicology, because you're like, unless she was impaired in some way, right?
Absolutely. And the normal procedure is it takes a couple weeks to get those results from an autopsy. It's not 48 hours here. You can have the body and go bury it in your backyard. That only happens to Trump.
Can I just say, because you have such this history, people famously know that you worked on The Apprentice with Donald Trump and, started talking quite openly about a lot of things about him a long time ago. But you said what you're seeing from Trump's vast tentacles of corruption, IG toadies on loan from Doug Ducey, acting sycophants. You just said it should be very illuminating for those who wonder how Trump got away with so many crimes in his New York City days, because people from New York are like, he's always been a crook. We've known that from day one, right? But you look right up through what's happening right now. You're like, oh, of course, he has somehow loyalists and people that are destroying evidence and God knows what, right?
Absolutely. He's always had a skill, a sixth sense to attract men and some women around him that he could corrupt. He can look into a crowd and see the kind of guys that are going to do his bidding, the dogs that hunt, so to speak. And that's what his security team was. Keith Schiller was an NYPD sergeant rammer who would knock down doors of drug dens in the Bronx. He was the guy who knocked the door down. He went up to Trump in court and said, "You need to hire me." Right? And Trump hired him. And then when you're walking around with a detail of ex-NYPD cops, you get away with stuff in New York City, right? Because it's an impenetrable sort of wall of authority. And Trump knows that. And we could probably get into it, but the Secret Service stuff seems I worked with the Secret Service tons. I did inaugurations. I did, the tree lighting at the White House, all kinds of stuff. where the president was at. The Secret Service under Trump was a different Secret Service, and I went to high school with Bobby Engel, the guy he tried to choke in the back of the SUV.
Yeah.
And he was like a Marine kind of jarhead cop type. And that's the type that Trump will suck in. And it's almost like before they know it, they're doing his bidding. Do you know what I mean? I'm not even saying they all set out with the intention of being corrupted, but being in Trump's orbit will corrupt you by osmosis.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Who was the guy he hired because he saw him beat someone up? Wasn't that
Matthew Calamari?
The squid. Matty the squid.
Matty the squid.
Yeah.
Right, Matty the Squid. And he beat up a guy at the U.S. Open, which was one of my gigs. It happened before I was on the show, but I did it for 12 years. And actually, our VIP box was right next to Trump's box, and he actually had assaulted somebody in that room. But yeah, he beat up a protester who was heckling him in Havana. Like a fan at the U.S. Open, and Matty kicked his butt, and then Trump hired him.
Yeah. Well, okay, speaking of the sycophants, you said, in my opinion, AG Garland should have walked in on day one, said, if you were appointed by Trump, raise your hand. Okay, now grab your things and get the F out. Don't give criminals a year and a half to destroy evidence. I mean, I think that's the problem, is no one, despite how many years he's been at it, no one imagines the degree of criminality. You're like, oh, they planned this in advance and then destroyed all the evidence already in advance. I mean, you listen to Matt Gaetz on tape to Roger Stone, and you're like, oh, this is how they got away with the original treason, because Stone was the one that could have put Trump away for the, Russia thing.
Yeah.
Right?
100%. That's exactly how it works. That's how the mob works. That's what I was referring to in New York City. That's what he did. He would corrupt people to get building permits and all this kind of stuff. And once he gets the compromise, he owns you. And like your previous caller said, I think our new leadership should have read the room a little more, right? Because we weren't going back to normal institutional times.
Yeah.
Trump had corrupted it. You need to know where all the landmines are, so to speak, that he left for the next guy, as he surely did. And I wrote that tweet because remember the scene in Glengarry Glen Ross when Alec Baldwin comes in, he's like, steak knives are second place. Third place is you're fired.
Exactly.
We needed that kind of cathartic, there's a new sheriff in town, get out of here. If it turns out you're not corrupt, we'll let you back in. But right now, everybody get out of the building, while we search your file, so to speak.
By the way, could I ask, speaking of building contracts, could I ask a random question? You tweeted Trump never got a building contract that did not have a job attached to it. It's crass but true and well known in certain real estate circles.
Yeah, that's what he would do. That's what I was referring to. When he owned the Plaza Hotel, for example, he would have these big parties in his suite there, and he would invite building inspectors, guys he needed to do business with, loan officers at banks. And back then he owned Trump Model Management, where he would bring in these girls from, the post-Soviet bloc, Eastern Europe, and he would have them served up as party favors, basically, at these parties. And then he would collect compromise on the dudes who availed themselves,
So that would be blackmail, but on top of the human trafficking operation that he was running.
Bingo.
Okay.
And that's not hyperbole. That's in books. David Kay wrote about that. Richard James Zirin. Like, I'm not making this stuff up for your listeners. They can research it.
Right. So... Can we, speaking of Havana, I was trying to, some people have a photographic memory. Did she not write in her first book about him raping her, right? And also, he got a hair transplant, a doctor that she had recommended, I think, and he was in a lot of pain, right? Or something didn't work properly. And so he wanted her to feel the same pain. This is what she wrote, that he pulled out clumps of her hair so she would be in as much pain and raped her. But then what happened that she then retracted it, right? And said, oh, well, I didn't really mean rape in the classics. Like, you know what I mean? She backpedaled after a settlement. Yeah. Can you explain?
The settlement, the divorce settlement. She talked about it. It left a scar on his forehead, and he said, "You ruined my life." And then he committed those physical acts of violence upon her and said, "How do you feel now?" Right? So she documented all this, but when they were going through the divorce, when they finally got the settlement, one of the contingencies was that she'd have to sign an NDA and retract those statements to get the check. And she did, and went off to live in, relative obscurity until he had to catch up with her, last month. But That's what he does. And that's, that story is key. As hard as it is to hear, that's an insight into his personality. He's a very sadistic human being. You know, he's much sicker than even the world knows, seeing all of his crimes. And I know tons of people that have similar stories. Not tons, but I know a few. And they're their stories, so I can't tell them. But, he was known as a very sort of violent, sort of man.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, again, up till today, you said it's becoming pretty apparent how vast the conspiracy was on January 6th, from the Secret Service agents that were Trump toadies to the DHS and members of Congress. That was a straight-up coup attempt. It was the only the mediocrity of MAGA that made it fail, locked them all up. Yeah, I mean, they keep calling it stupid Watergate or whatever, but I guess that's what's really sort of astounding, right, is that this guy, this bag of trans fats, like, how does he find people like the Secret Service, like you were saying, that they're not even loyal, not even to the Republican Party, right? That's why Pence was nervous, that he finds people that are loyal to the cult of Donald Trump, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I said he's got a sixth sense to do it, and he can find the personality type that it'll work on. Remember his chief, Kelly, was a chief of staff who's a good example. Kelly had 80% of that personality, right? He's a Boston guy. He's a military guy. He sort of leans a little racist based on his record. Trump thought he could completely corrupt him, and he couldn't, right? And John Kelly left the chief of staff operation. But most guys aren't John Kelly. Most guys give into it, and that loyalty thing becomes like a codependent relationship, because Trump's also an active addict, as I've said. And addiction has its own psychological, it's a family disease, they say, right? So you get sort of drawn into covering for the guy. And Trump is very charming. I know that sounds bizarre, but if you're in his inner circle, he's always puffing those guys up. How's your wife? How's your kids? Let me call them on their birthday. He knows how to sort of make you, sort of cultivate your loyalty.
Ted Bundy was like that. Yeah, very charming. Most sociopaths are very charming.
Right. So exactly. Narcissists are charming. It's part of the whole, psychological bag of tricks that they have.
Yeah.
And can I say one more thing? You mentioned Matt Gaetz. That example of him showing those pictures to other congressmen on the floor of the House, saying, look at this girl I slept with last night. What he was doing, in my opinion, was looking for guys that wanted some of that. He was looking for the guy who was going to say, that looks good. And then Matt would say, well, come by Trump Hotel on Friday night. I'm having a little party in the suite, And then he would hook that person up with a girl, and then they would own that congressman. I think Matt Gaetz was fishing on behalf of Trump to pull people in for compromise.
I'm curious, watching a lifetime of this, of Donald Trump and what's going on now with January 6th. What do you think? What do you think is going to happen? Is he going to go down? Are all these people going to go down for him? You know what I mean? Like, are they going to flip? Are they going to do what is going to be? Or do you feel like this lifetime of karma is going to catch up with him?
God, it's the question of the hour, isn't it? Rolling Stone had some good reporting last night that he's shifting his legal defense to look for a fall guy now. They're going to look for a Mark Meadows, rather, or somebody like that to sort of lay the blame on. I think legally that's their strategy. I'd like to say he's going to go to prison. I don't really see that that's ever going to happen. In my opinion, he's sort of already gotten away with it. He's 76 years old. He just had a golf tournament this weekend. He's having rallies every weekend. He's still fundraising. So even if they sort of get him dead to rights, it's going to take years to work its way through the courts. He's going to be able to pay fines and stuff like that. What I do hope, and what I think is commendable, is the January 6th committee. I think they're really illuminating how vast the conspiracy is. And I think, there'll be some comeuppance, but it's a race against the clock.
Yes,
the flip side of that is if they take back the House and the Senate in November, it's all over.
Andrew Weissman said that. And can I just say, you're still a helper at the end of the day. You tweeted, y'all need to stop making fun of how Trump looks today. He can't wear his girdle when he's playing golf. And I think that was nice of you to point that out.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm still looking out for him, It's a hard plastic girdle that I've seen people strap him into, and it's not a pretty sight, but he can't swing a golf club in it. So when he's on the course, he can't wear the shoe lifts or the girdle, so he's out of his element.
Why he's a perfect candidate for men who look like oldlesbians.com, my favorite website. All right, Noel, please come back. No, let's not make it so long. Oh, you're staying. I didn't know that. Okay. Stay. Jared Kushner's new book. I recommend you buy. I'm not buying your stupid book, Stephanie Miller Show t-shirt at stephaniemiller.com. But Jared's book, I love this. CNN anchor Chris Wallace revealed that Mick Mulvaney, they talked about what they talked about in the green room at CNN, which I don't think you're supposed to do. But anyway, he said Mulvaney is called BS on a pair of anecdotes from Kushner's book, one alleging that John Kelly shoved Ivanka after a contentious meeting, and another about Kushner revealing a cancer diagnosis. He said in the book, Kushner claims he told Mulvaney he had thyroid cancer. Mulvaney said, he never told me that. I have no recollection of it, and if he had, I would have remembered it. So, they're all such liars. It's hard to know who to believe, right?
Yeah. In that case, I'm just hearing about this now, but I'm going with Mick Mulvaney because, I do know Jared and Ivanka, right? And I know how conniving they are and how manipulative they are of their public image and everything. That book would have been filtered through a PR person that was trying to rehab his image, and the cancer thing would have been a sympathetic thing to put in there. And say he did have cancer, he was getting the best treatment in the world. He made $640 million while serving in the White House, right? At the same time, his father-in-law was trying to take away health care from everyday Americans, right? So to think that he would think that would somehow make it look good is typical Jared taking advice from somebody who's charging him too much an hour. The Ivanka thing is definitely BS, because Ivanka is not the type of person who would take that shove and just be a shrinking violet and walk away. She would have had John Kelly dismembered, if he had done that. Do you know what I'm saying? You would have heard about it at the time. I guarantee you. And Trump would have heard about it.
And Jared would have made $2 billion off someone that would have done it. But okay,
exactly.
Hey, let's not. What you said of all the people in that circle, you said Jared creeped you out the most.
Creepy, 100%. He had the air of a serial killer back then. I say that joking, but his nickname was, we nicknamed him after a famous serial killer. He just creeped people out. And when I first met them, they were dating. They broke up, right? Because Jared didn't want anything to do with that family. They're disgusting. Trump would call him the Jew. Is the Jew here yet?
Oh, God.
He was like, I'm out of here. They broke up. Right? Then Wendy Dang Murdoch, Putin's ex-girlfriend and Rupert Murdoch's ex-wife, took Ivanka out on a cruise, right? Somewhere off the coast of Turkey in a summer and said, no, you and Jared need to get back together. You're the next big power couple. So the next season I was back on the show, they were all of a sudden engaged and married.
Wow.
Right? And their wedding was a disaster at Bedminster. But anyway, and that's personal. I guess I won't get into it, but somebody got carried out of that wedding, and it wasn't the groom. I'll leave it at that.
Wow.
Had a few too many. But anyway, here's what I tell people. Trump wants music to play when he walks into the room. He wants to get high and he wants to hit on women, right? He's a narcissist who wants an immediate thing to fill that hole inside of his soul. Jared doesn't have a soul, and he's playing the long game. And Ivanka is right there with him. And that's what's scary, is they see how every moment can benefit them. I guarantee you that Jared had that idea about the $2 billion, payout from the KSA Sovereign Wealth Fund for his hedge fund when he left the White House. Because the first thing they did when they went to the White House was make the first foreign trip to Saudi Arabia, right? And KSA was prepped onto how to deal with Trump. They gave him the orb ceremony. They gave him the sword dance.
Yeah.
They had his picture on the side of a building 500 feet long when he left the airport. That would have all been advanced on behalf of Kushner to say, my father-in-law is coming. Here's how you own him. Here's how you appeal to him, and then we can do whatever we want for the next 4 years, cutting side deals. So that's the danger, because in the midst of all that is American foreign policy. Yeah. Right? And you're not dealing with a benign force in Saudi Arabia, right? You're dealing with people that behead their own citizens. Yeah. So it's
the other big bag of rats thing in Jared's book is he says he was at war with Steve Bannon, and Steve Bannon said at one point, "I will break you in half. Don't with me." It's just they're all so awful. It's hard to pick a winner, right?
Yeah. They're all just so awful, that's you couldn't say it any better. They're all just horrible, horrible people. It's like that final meeting they had on January 5th or whatever they talked about in the hearings, where they're all shouting each other down in the Oval Office, and you had the lady in the leopard skin thing with the Diet Dr. Pepper, and Rudy's calling people the P word. It's just it's insane that's how our government was operating.
And this is what we should chill you to the bone. In terms of getting out to vote, Peter Navarro floats dream cabinet for possible second Trump term, which includes, wait for it, Jeanine Pirro as Attorney General. So
Oh, my
I don't. At that point, his entire cabinet will be drunk all the time. Rudy will be in there somewhere. We'll all be drunk because
Because we can't take it.
no, exactly.
I'll be in Ireland or something. I'm out of here.
No, how do we follow you and worship you live and in podcast form?
Thank you so much. It's noelcasler.com is my website. You can find me on Twitter at Noel Casler Comedy. And this Wednesday, I'm going to be at the Music Room in West Yarmouth, Massachusetts, Cape Cod.
Republicans say they won't cut Social Security, Medicare, or Medicaid. But can honest, hard-working middle-class Americans really believe what these politicians say? Republicans said they wouldn't overturn Roe v. Wade. Here's what Supreme Court Justices Gorsuch, Kavanaugh, and Coney Barrett said during their Senate confirmation hearings.
Roe v. Wade, it is a precedent of the United States Supreme Court. A good judge will consider it as precedent of the United States Supreme Court.
Roe v. Wade. It's settled as a precedent of the Supreme Court.
Roe is not a super precedent, but that doesn't mean that Roe should be overruled.
Well, we saw how that turned out. They played us for fools. Tell your elected officials to keep their hands off of our Social Security and health care benefits. Fool me once. Let Majority Rule was responsible for this message. LetMajorityRule.org is a project of the Marvin Lucas Super PAC, which is responsible for and paid for this ad and is not affiliated with or authorized by any political campaign or candidate or candidates committee.